Specific Role of Design in the Enterprise Space, presented by Reem Gamil, Director of Experience Design at Verta, and hosted by Bestica. My name is Chameleons, and my colleague here is Ross Stewart. He and I will be moderating this webinar. Many thanks to the team at Bestica and the Full Harbor team, our president and CEO, for inviting Reem to join us today. First, I just want to say a few things about Bestica, the organization is a pioneer in the recruiting field and has been around for over a decade. Our recruiters, Melanie, Carlos, and Scott are excellent resources who are available to you. They do a great job of matching candidates with the best organizations. You can find them in our Bestica community or through LinkedIn. If you're an organization looking for a candidate, feel free to call, visit the Bestica website, or email our recruiters. You'll see the names right there on the video slide. Before we get started, I'd just like to go over a few items. You're all muted, but you'll have the opportunity to attend questions of the presenter, just by putting your questions in the section contained in the control panel. And you can send them in at any time during the presentation. We'll collect them and answer them at the end. Now let me say a little bit about Reem. It currently has been designed at Verta, a leading provider of sensor technology and information solutions for the insurance industry. She brings over a decade of design expertise across digital media and industry verticals from banking, finance, healthcare, insurance, telecommunications, and commerce. Prior to joining Verta, Reem served as a senior consultant with the award-winning business and IT consulting firm, BGI, where she led the design of large-scale projects for clients such as Canada Trust, Health Ontario, Bank of Montreal, and telecommunications. She is a passionate supporter and advocate of the transformation of research policies and calls for the shift from STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, to the integration of art and design into educational practices. A native Canadian, Reem now calls Seattle home, where she lives with her husband, children, and their two cats, Chester and Pluto. Please welcome Reem.
Thank you, Tammy and Ross. It's just a pleasure being here. I want to start out by introducing myself. My name is Reem Gamil. I'm the Director of Experience Design at Verta. We are a SaaS-based solution provider in tech. Been around for well over 20 years, and I have the privilege of leading our product portfolio of over 20 plus products. We are based out of the greater Seattle area, and I'm going to share with you a topic that's really near and dear to my heart around the evolving role of designers, specifically within the enterprise space today. So I'm very excited to be here. Want to first start out by thanking Bestica for arranging this really wonderful platform of dialogue and knowledge sharing. I think it's a great testament to just the rich diversity and the growth that the design and UX community has experienced over the last several years, I would say. So it's just, it's fantastic that we're all here really talking about in depth kind of the changes that have taken place in the design world and the UX space more particularly. First, I want to start out by sharing some of my background. Again, as you heard, a native of Toronto. I didn't initially start out within the design industry. I have over a decade of design experience, but my first kind of background was in international politics with a minor in languages, and I got a chance to work with a lot of really interesting people when working for the government of Canada, and then quickly realized that my passion was not necessarily in that space, and pivoted shortly thereafter into the design world, where I got my background in digital media design from the Academy of International Design and Technology. And I began my career, like many of you who started in design over a decade ago, in really the print medium. I did quite a bit of visual design, branding design, advertising and editorial design, and experienced my fair share of kind of the breadth of where design was at that time and how it was used as a lever to really help companies communicate their vision and their value propositions. And then that quickly evolved into developing digital experiences, where I spent quite a bit of time developing websites and motion graphics and demo reels for the educational sector, enterprise organizations, educational industries and companies. Was really, really interesting and intrigued by more of the complexity of application and software design, and found myself doing more and more of that type of work over the years. This is kind of a body of work that's reflective of more recent work that we've done as a collective team at Verta. And so part of our body of work is really to look at the end-to-end digital experiences across multiple market segments and devices. And so we develop kind of the breadth of every platform device for our market segment, and that's been really, really exciting. Also have a bit of expertise in the consulting space, and had the opportunity to work with really great clients ranging in the retail sector, telecommunications, healthcare, informatics, and of course insurance and banking and finance. And I think a lot of my passion lies in really just unpacking some of the complexities that organizations and industries like these and others have been experiencing over the course of the past many years, I would say. And so I want to really just dive into this really dynamic conversation that's been happening over the last number of years about this evolving role of designers, specifically with in-house teams inside the enterprise space. And want to kind of take a step back and describe what has been happening around it and provide some context around why these changes have been taking shape over the last number of years. Well, there's been an accelerated rate of change. This gentleman may be familiar to some of you. He is known in many circles as the futurist. Ray Kurzweil is a leading influencer in technology. He is the Google Director of Engineering and founder of the Singularity University. He's a computer scientist by trade, but he was also the inventor of many different innovations, including the flatbed scanner, optical character recognition, the first print-to-speech reading machine for the blind. His accolades are very impressive. He received in 1999 the National Medal of Innovation and Technology from the White House, and he's had just a really remarkable track record of accurately predicting the future. And specifically why I bring him here to showcase and talk about is his description is very poignant around the rate of change that we are experiencing as a society, as a culture, and that's never really been experienced before. And so his poignancy lies in that we won't experience 100 years of progress in the 21st century. It will be more like 100,000 at the rate that we're at today. That's a very staggering shift when you think about all the ways that people consume information and the rate at which they consume it. This is really another interesting statistic to share. The World Economic Forum shows this statistic that 83% of the globe's access to the internet is through a smartphone. That happened in less than 8 years. And so not only are we experiencing rapid volumes of change at an accelerated rate, but we are consuming it with an unprecedented rate that we've never experienced before in our lifetime. Another piece of information I think that's also very interesting to share, again in context to why this is important and what it means to the evolving role of enterprise and what design does to impact that shift. The accelerated evaluation is also really another interesting point I want to share. This graphic is a representation of the changes that have taken place in terms of how companies have formed and scaled in the last 20 years. And so if you think about the world economy or the old economy that took place in 20 years, I give the examples here of Kodak, who as an organization took 74 years. They reached 75,000 employees. They supported a town and a university before they reached a valuation of $1 billion. Now compare that with an organization like Instagram, who just under 2 years with 13 employees were acquired for $1.1 billion. This is a very important and radical shift that every designer needs to understand and realize of how companies are scaling through the use of design. But the numbers matter here, and that's why I'm sharing it. What does this mean in terms of the rise of design inside the business sector? More and more we're seeing organizations beginning to use design not just for its aesthetic value, but publications and mainstream media are now communicating how organizations in corporate America are beginning to leverage design or design thinking methodologies and frameworks as a competitive differentiator within their business models. So unlike days gone by where people were creating websites or starting social media ads or digital campaigns as an extension to their business model, today we're seeing a very rapid transformation in people's business models by becoming digital. And we experience so many things today as citizens, as employees, as business owners. One of the useful ways that design is helping to add value to organizations is by helping reframe problems in a way that has not necessarily been done before. And that's very important and critical in terms of the evolution of design as a discipline. So now you're seeing organizations and publications like the Harvard Business Review show and spend, this was the September issue of 2015, dedicate the entire publication of how healthcare, nonprofit, private sectors are using design inside their organizations to radically transform themselves and to become innovation leaders. That's a really staggering shift. I think it's really, really exciting if you're a designer at this time, because it means that the opportunities are very vast. While they might not necessarily be known, I think it's a very, very exciting time. There's another study conducted by a VC capitalist firm based out of California, Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield and Byers. If you are not familiar with the Design and Tech Report, I suggest that you go out and check it out. I think it's very insightful. John Maida, who heads up the research conducted for this report, is also one of the leading influencers that kind of straddles both design and tech, and has had a strong influence on how companies, especially in tech, can really leverage the value of design in a very different way than they have in the past. And so this is a really interesting study and outcome to share. This, by the way, is the result of the 2015 Design and Tech Report. The 2016 report was just released last week, so I encourage you to go look at it in full length. This is just a very high-level overview of some of the really key takeaways that I found interesting to share. But this is a reflection of the M&A activity, so mergers and acquisitions that took place pre-2013 until 2015. And if you look at some of the organizations, you will start to see a pattern happening. And so some of these organizations who are traditionally known for their competencies as tech giants or tech leaders or consulting leaders are starting to buy and acquire in wholesale design studios. They are acquiring design talent at mass because they have started to recognize, in order to stay relevant and ahead in a rapidly changing environment and society, design can help build and develop their in-house strategic business capabilities. That's not by accident. IBM has an audacious goal to hire 1,000 designers by the end of this year in 2016. Microsoft is at a count of 800 and growing of designers. And if you think about the history of those two organizations, historically, were not known for design. They were known for far vastly. We could go on about their competencies and the capabilities of what Microsoft and IBM and others like Accenture or Capital One brought to us in terms of their value add. What's even more interesting is to share that in the past, when we thought about technology, how did we solve it? Well, we added more technology, and we competed through speed or more memory, and that was really the old way of working. Today, that no longer applies, and so Moore's law no longer cuts it as a way to help create value and delight for our customers. We are beginning to leverage this framework called design and human centricity to help unpack some of the problems and challenges that we are facing in the globe today. And the numbers also tell the similar story. So if you think about some of the financial impacts around design value, this is really interesting to share. 27 startups were co-founded by designers, and 13 creative agencies were acquired by technology firms in the last 4 years. And again, this is 2015, mind you. That's a very different position for a designer to be in than we were many years ago. If you think back even 10 years ago. 5 startups co-founded by designers have raised more than $2.75 billion. That's a pretty interesting number. And so when we've been talking about, some of us in various circles, how do you quantify design? This is one of the ways you do it. These numbers tell a story, and these numbers continue to grow. That is a very interesting perspective and knowledge for us as designers to be aware of, and to think about that in your day-to-day environment. When you're creating work, how can you describe it and understand it in a way that makes sense to your audience? And then lastly, venture capitalist firms are now bringing designers to the table. I think it's a really interesting transition as well. So VC firms are now inviting designers to the table, not to draw pixels or create wireframes, but to help identify opportunities and to help evaluate companies through the lens of those designerly methodologies. Very exciting time. And again, this is not an isolated use case. This is happening today. And we spent a lot of time talking about, and many of us who are design leaders talking about, how do you quantify design? Well, there was this really great study conducted by the DMI, the Design Management Institute, and it's been referred to as the Design Value Index. And what they did was they conducted a study from the periods of 2004 to the period of 2014. And they measured and tracked 10 companies, publicly traded organizations, where design was part of their strategic business model. So they weren't just using design as an aesthetic outcome or solely dedicated to those outcomes. They were really leveraging design inside the decision-making engine of how they operated. It was a part of their culture, essentially. And they measured these organizations over the course of those 10 years against the S&P, the Standard & Poor's 500 index, for those 10 years, against organizations where design was not part of their strategic business models. And they found that there was a 228% return on investment. That's a pretty big number. And really important as a designer to understand this impact so that you can begin to describe and add value within your organizations in ways that you may not have necessarily thought of before. And I'll describe a little bit more about the tactics of the how in just a few moments. So what does this mean for designers? Well, it means that your role is expanding. There are many examples in many different industries. These are just some of a few where design is being used in new and innovative ways. They have design competencies within their organizations, and they're leveraging, again, design as a framework, not as a department that creates physical assets and then delivers that. Some of these are kind of interesting because you have, for the first time, a pivot by the European Union, who have undergone this global initiative to use design to help drive social innovations and public service changes. That's a radical shift. Similarly, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations or the Clinton Foundation are using design to help drive social change in the world, like climate change, underserved populations, poverty, again, through design. So what it means is that as a designer, you are now a facilitator of change. You are able to provide a skill and a competency and a fluency to organizations that were never necessarily open to the idea or aware of the idea that design could be used to radically shift mindset and introduce a new way of thinking that was not previously there. But again, what this means for designers is that in order to stay relevant, you need to have an expertise not just in your design domain on how to execute great wires or prototypes or animations or visual specs, but you really need to lean in and understand the language of business. It's not sufficient anymore. If you're looking to expand your career and develop your skills and to have a seat at the table, then that means understanding the business needs. And so you really need to become fluent and adaptive within your organization if you are a part of one, to understanding not just what the user needs, but what your business needs. And so, you know, as an organization, people are starting to bring into their organizations workshops. We facilitated one not too long ago where we brought a cross-disciplinary team together and we conducted a design thinking workshop on how to solve a business problem. And so there weren't any wireframes or prototypes in the physical sense, but we did use this tool set to help unpack different perspectives through empathy, through ideation, through prototyping ideas, and begin testing them in the market. That's a very different perspective on how we have necessarily thought about designers in the past, and this is happening every day. Not only are our organizations and corporate America waking up to this shift, but so too are higher ed institutions. And so I was recently at one of these academic institutions this past month, and this is happening across the United States and the globe, by the way, where academia is beginning to partner with the business sector and really reinvigorate and innovate on how they teach and formally train their designers. And so many of these colleges are beginning to rethink their programs, their training modules, and their formats so that they can positively prepare their students for real-world expectations and challenges. You have students now really understanding and becoming fluent in the art of pitching, about creating business models and business plans. These are designers. They're not business students. They're not MBA students. These are designers who are taught how to sell their work, how to describe the value of what design brings to business challenges. Again, if you were part of the design industry many years ago, this is not how designers have traditionally been trained. You were either a webmaster or a web designer and you kind of just figured things out. You may have read a couple books, taken a few courses, but think about what that means to the designers coming out of schools in the next few years, what they are being equipped with, how they're being supported, how there is this interchange or intersection between business and academia. There are innovation labs within these institutions today. And we're seeing these innovation labs also in the business sector. But for the first time, there's starting to become this really great convergence between both of those two institutions. So as a designer, it means you need to really craft and master the art of selling design value to folks who are not designers. They may be techs, they may be product managers, they may be business analysts, they may be your boss or the executive team, but it really requires an understanding of how and where the business has gaps. And then using design thinking and mastering your own kind of creative competencies to describe value differently than you have before. And there's this increasing volume of reference material now that's coming in, pouring into the market, proliferating books and devices on design communication, design management, design leadership, and how to really repackage and frame that value in a different sort of way. And it's still very connected to what some of those tech industries are looking for. Even if you're not in the tech industry, you saw some examples earlier that I shared with companies who come from government or not-for-profit are endless, and they are looking for designers to help them create meaning and value and lead their innovation labs and or help create them. But at the end of the day, it's about creating models that help them stay competitive. And if you begin to think about what that means for some organizations, their job functions are shifting. The way they're describing designers are shifting. And more you'll see language around how to mentor non-designers, how to create product strategies rooted in customer insights. Because as designers, we know we've always been thinking about user scenarios and customer needs. Well, how do you take that kind of problem set and reframe it and create strategies around it? And leading other teams. Are you able to mentor other teams? Are you able to influence your team members and your company using design as a process tool? A really, really exciting shift that's happening, folks. And I would encourage you to investigate and learn more about, some of these changes. They are happening more in some organizations than they are in others, but it is absolutely happening. And so what's next? What it really means is that designers, if you are a designer in today's economy and market landscape, that you really need to start thinking about how you can act as a vessel and as a bridge and facilitator and really a leader to bring about organizational change using a talent and a skill that you already have, but exercised in a different manner that you may have necessarily had access to or been comfortable with in the past. I hope that was informative. I had a phenomenal time talking about this. I know we may have some questions. I'm happy to expand on any of the topics that I've shared or some of the information. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Reem, for that very insightful presentation. We've been receiving questions through the presentation, and Tammy is going to field those to you now.
Okay, Reem, I have one right here. For you. It says there is a lot of design. It's a great question. That means it means different things to people. For designers, not only design, have technical expertise, whether it's front-end coding, ability, or whatnot. And that may mean a lot of things. We look for candidates that have influence in design execution, but I think probably paramount. And again, the reasons I just described that's the traditional meaning of being going around hybrid, but I think today having influence for business context, not just one technical background, is really important. And a lot more of that going forward. Okay, I have another one here, and the next question is, how do you make design
Well, that's a great question. I think our expectations have certainly changed. I think a lot of folks, and largely because of the consumer space, products like Apple or the Alexa have really changed our expectations about quality, about bridging the gap between technology and human. And people just have a lot more expectations in service, certainly. Whether they're buying a product or whether you're buying a service, the expectations around it change, and we expect a lot more personalization and customization than they have before. And rightly so.
Right, and here's another one. One person asked which companies are hiring designers to, or
some of the ones that I've mentioned before, in my deck, there are a lot of consulting companies that they're based. I think a couple of things to think about your school for that type of work is to really understand what interests you and inspires you, and I would say geographically based as well. Not indicative of all of North America by any means, but you will find the centers of innovation on the far east coast or the west coast. You'll see more of that in the short term. In the long term, you're going to see more organization adapting to that time.
Is it important for designers to be versatile in UX strategy?
Again, it comes back to your organization. Versatile, well, good, but being diluted also is not. So I think you need to really think about strength and balance. What is versatile? Versatile can mean really being focused on understanding the customer or the business side, building that in. How do you use design to help build strategy? Versatile can mean that you have a really strong technical expertise, so you're able to bring those together within your strategy. So it's very contextual. I don't know if that answers the question. But I think you really need to look at the business that you serve and finding out what drives that business, what value means to your customers, and then finding a way to lean in and try to drive creating your strategy.
Okay, we have another one here. What do you think is the biggest impact of digital natives entering the workforce?
I think they just have a lot more fluency in business implications. We're seeing a lot of young graduates starting up their own businesses, particularly in the social innovation space, and they're designing business models just as easily and fluently as they are designing a prototype that supports them. And so digital first individual is going to be thinking in the take on. Whereas historically designers are really thinking about very technical experiences, and that's no fault of theirs. It's just the way we've come to evolve and mature as an industry.
Okay, and another one here. Any suggestions on how to approach an organization so that designers be part of the requirements rather than the VAs or tasks that designers do?
I would say go outside of your comfort zone and meet with other business units. It's really not a question of looking for permission. It's really meeting with different stakeholders within your organization, finding out what your internal customers need. And by internal customers, I'm really talking about just those business units. Learning what drives their bottom line and finding a way to surface that to your team or to others who are in need of something. So don't just look for the products and try to go outside of your comfort zone and meet with those different stakeholders to kind of what problems they're trying to solve and by what means and tools they're trying to solve them. If you find a way to help them using design framework or whatnot, then I would say give that a shot. because what you end up doing is you introduce the model of design, and what you have as a designer is kind of both the creative side and the analytical side. So we're constantly thinking about problem solving. Designers problem solve in very small that not every business maybe understand or be aware of, but they're certainly interested.
Here's another one. And the feature is a feature of the difference between customer-facing B2B apps and internal enterprise apps changing.
I think we rephrase that one more time.
Sure. Is the nature of the difference between customer-facing apps and internal enterprise apps changing?
I think it's changing in regards to the way we create our enterprise solutions. We use those and growing expectations they will be as easy to use and delightful and dare I say addictive to use as our products that we use in our personal time. And so I think a lot of organizations are waking up to that, adding a lot more of a human connection within our enterprise apps. We spend, many of us, well over 8 hours a day doing what we do as well in our professional lives. So it absolutely makes a whole lot of sense to start considering how to make those solutions and tools that we support as productive and useful and engaging for our employees as they would be for a game that we use or ought to be used in our professional lives. So I think the gap is increasing radically.
And now another individual asks, how did you get at the table that people are making strategic decisions?
That's a great question, one that's often asked. The way you get to the table is by spending some time understanding what those people who are at the table are thinking about, what keeps them up at night, what they're trying to solve. And the way you do that is you expose yourself to the business at large. Then at the time when somebody in professional services or in development or in marketing and do an informational interview, find out what is the biggest pain point. I would almost treat it as a design exercise. If that's your target audience, to get that seat at the table, then to find out what roles they play, what problems they're trying to solve, what are they doing in the current state of doing that, what are your competitors doing, how are they trying to solve problems, and create a plan to think through how you can help. And innovation begins by doing something different. So getting a seat at the table is really, I would say, not as difficult as we talk about, but it means going outside of your typical framework as a designer and to think as a business leader, not just as a designer.
All right, I have another individual asking, are you emailing out your deck?
I am happy to email my deck. We're going to coordinate with Bestica to share some of those insights. So yes, we can.
All right. That looks to be about it for the current list of questions. Now, everybody who's listening in, please post any questions to the questions to the control panel, and we can get to those in a little bit as well. If you have any other questions based on what you've heard today, or just as what you use and okay. So you're getting a lot of thanks, Reem. The thankers people that they really appreciate the refreshing points that you have, and they really enjoy the test house. So thank you for that, and thank you for answering the questions as well. Wonderful. All right, and thanks everyone now. So we're near the end of our webinar. So unless you have any other questions, we'll just go ahead and Oh, one more question. What is recurringly available? Yes, this is recurringly available. So checking this right next with the system that we're using, it takes them a little while to put it up into the system. So that's not us, that's good webinar. So heads up on that. Any last questions? Okay. So Reem, thank you. And thanks everyone for attending our webinar, Evolve Roles and Devices in the Enterprise Space. If you have any other questions, please contact us at 610-614-4192. Webinars will receive survey on questions and we will be able to provide feedback. Also, call us, email, or to the recording of today's webinar. Now, if you heard this webinar today and you want to consider this for a future webinar, please take your information or at least reach the topic of Bestica, and we will be happy to work with you consideration. On behalf of Bestica and our presenter, Reem Gamil, thank you for joining us today. Have a great day. Thank you.